All right, we're just going to go down the line here. He's an athletics Hall of Famer. He's now in the California Hall of Fame. What other Hall of Fames are you in?
I think 5.
You're in 5?
I think.
3-time World Series champion, a World Series MVP, 2-time ALCS MVP, Roberto Clemente Award winner, led the American League in wins, and his number 34 is retired with the Oakland Athletics, and was a pitching coach when the Padres went to the World Series, GM of the Diamondbacks, assistant GM with the Toronto Blue Jays, and an agent. There's nothing you haven't done in this game except be an owner.
And a manager.
Well, that you.
I haven't managed yet.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to our show we'll have later on today, but we wanted to bring you on and just kick some things around. Kind of putting your old GM hat on. How are you liking seeing the young A's being promoted and watching the kids play?
You know, they're self-promoting, which I really like that. I'm not too sure, and I really haven't watched what the team is doing to promote these kids, but you know, in their post-game interviews, when they've won baseball games, and I mean, you know who right now are the names that we know that Geloff is a name that's come up and he's done a great job, and you know we talked about Lawrence Butler, Ruiz has been here all year. You know, those are the names that are floating around now. Langoliers is still considered a young player. I believe that this year he's not had a great offensive year, but he's done a great job behind the plate, catch and throw, throwing out runners. Then you look at your starting rotation. JP Sears is the only guy that's been in the rotation from the start to the finish. And so when you talk about promotion, there's a lot of self-promotion from the young players. And I adore that and I admire it because what you're letting the fans know is that, yeah, we're having a tough year this year. We got kicked around. We've gotten beaten down. We've been clubbed over the head. But we're waiting for next year.
Well, and it's been a lot of fun to, you know, watch these kids that we have talked about actually, you know, you can't really say they've blossomed yet, but to watch Geloff get American League Player of the Month, to see what we've heard and, you know, saw a little bit of spring training with Lawrence Butler, you start to see some hope, right? You start to see some future.
You do. You know, and you know, Miller pitched a couple of innings of a few nights ago coming off the IL and showed promising stuff. You know, he clocked out, I think he topped out at 102.
Yeah.
And, you know, you got to like the slider. And so it's good to see him healthy and back on the mound. And so that kind of gives you an idea of who your lead guy is going to be. You know, Waldachek has shown signs. And I'm talking about pitching because I don't care what anybody says. If you can't pitch, you're not going to win games.
You had no chance.
Yeah, and so you know, when you look at this team, it's great to look at the great position players that are doing great things out there. But other than J.P. Sears, we put Blackburn in another category. There's not a lot of promise in the starting rotation. Miller got hurt. We're yet to see how he's going to be. We have every reason to think that he's going to be a great starter, great in that rotation. You know, Waldachek has been inconsistent all year long. Walks have been a menace to him. Medina, the same. He's had inconsistency. He shows signs of doing some great things. You love him. I love him personally. But you just want to see more from that starting rotation and you know, you're gonna have to piece together your bullpen as well. I mean, you can go out and score runs, but if you can't stop the other side from scoring runs, it's going to be another tough year next year.
You have said for a while now that you really like J.P. Sears. What does it mean to you that he is finishing the season? He is going to give you 30 or more starts.
Well, he had a tough April. I mean, I'm sorry, he did. April was a tough month for him. I think a 6 ERA in April, and then August was a tough month for him with an 8. But the bottom line is he's not shied away from making a start every fifth or 6th day. He shows up, and I think that that's important for your teammates to know. that you can count on, and that he's going to be in the rotation. He right now he's showing that he's durable. And only pitching 104 innings in the minor leagues, and then having to take the workload that he's taken on this year, and he could finish this year with 170, 175 innings by year's end, after only pitching 104 innings in the minor leagues. And so I just think that him performing in the way that he has, doing the things that he has, showing the improvement throughout the year, pitching the innings. There were things that he needed to do early in the year, and we talked about it, Tony. He needed to incorporate the changeup, and he's done that. I think his breaking ball for me has gone backwards. It's more of the sweeper versus the slider. And I think the slider is more conducive to him getting right-handed hitters out. And that may be because of the fatigue and the long season, that he's lost that downward mode and that shape of the good slider. And we'll see what happens come spring training. But I think having him in the rotation, making the amount of starts that he has, competing the way he has all year long, I think that's important for his teammates to see, but even more important for the management to see, because when you go to spring training, you have to know who you can count on.
Yeah, and building a bullpen year after year just seems so hard to do. It's just so fickle. Like, certain guys are good one year, the next year they're not the same. You just you really, as a front office guy, you're kind of rolling the dice, thinking that we're gonna come out of spring training with these guys. Hopefully they do well. If not, we could be switching in and out a lot of guys.
Even a period of time when we didn't count that much on the bullpen. I had a chance to work with Kevin Towers.
Yeah.
And Kevin believed in building his bullpen. He believed in it. That's what he concentrated on in the off season. My starting rotation in '98 was a good starting rotation. We had guys that threw 220, 230 innings. Not just one or two guys. We had four guys that did it. Our four starting pitchers. Our fifth guy was a guy that we dropped when we had off days. But past that starting rotation, when we looked at our bullpen and the guys and how he put together that bullpen, we were very good. And it's not a surprise that we were able to beat the teams in the National League and eventually play the Yankees in the World Series.
Yeah, I mean, you're pitching. I mean, Sterling Hitchcock was the MVP against the Braves in the NLCS. I mean, you guys had, your staff was fantastic. Now, when we look at the division, you're close to people on both the Rangers and the Houston Astros, right? So it's like, we know how close you are to Dusty Baker, and you have a lot of connections inside the Astros. Reggie Jackson's over there now. And then on the Texas Rangers, as you just mentioned, your Padres, Bruce Bochy was the manager. Yeah. So Bochy rule, Chris Young. I mean, know so many. What you're watching one team go like this and the other team go like this. What do you make of the West?
I think it's gonna. The great thing is that a lot of these teams, the Rangers, Astros, and Seattle, will have an opportunity to make their fate, I guess is the best way to put it, because they're going to play each other.
Yeah, your fate's in your own hands.
Yeah, they're going down the stretch. They're going to be able to pick where they're going to end up. I think that Boch and Dusty are two of the best managers in baseball. I believe that, and they've proven that. They're not guys that have not been around the block. They've been around the block a couple of times, and I think if you put the other guy on the other side and there's not a good matchup, they're going to run circles around that guy on the other side. And so, Boch right now is going through a tough period. Texas has gotten beaten. They got beat 3 games against Houston this past series. And so, they're going to pick it up. I talked with Boch. Eovaldi, his last time out, didn't throw the ball very well, but he's coming off of a rehab stint. I think they were very shocked at the performance from Scherzer the other day against the Astros. He didn't get out of the 4th inning, gave up I think it was a 7 spot. And so, I mean, those guys are going to be the guys that are going to carry Texas Rangers wherever they're going to go. Those 2 guys are the guys that are going to carry them. But let's not underestimate the rest of their starting rotation. The rest of their starting rotation has been good. Otherwise, they wouldn't be close to 80 wins in this season. So you know what you're going to get from them. And I think with the Astros, there's metal there. They've been through the battles. They've shown up. They've been in World Series. They have that experience, and so they know what to do. And they're not healthy yet. So when they get totally healthy, you can expect great things from them. Seattle is young. Those kids are what do they say? Ignorance is bliss. They're going out and they're just playing great baseball. They're being carried by a young center fielder who is multi-talented and can do many, many things. But by him leading the way, he's got the rest of that offensive lineup following him and following his lead. And their pitching is pretty doggone good.
Yeah.
It's underestimated how good their starting and their bullpen is.
I think about the A's being up in Seattle in front of those packed crowds. Recently just played the Toronto Blue Jays, who are fighting to get in this thing. And then now you're going to try and play spoiler in division again, now in Texas, then in Houston. How good is this for the young players to be in these type of environments where crowds are going to be packed? These teams are playing for something. You're playing against star players, some of the best players in the game. What does this mean for the A's young players?
I mean, if they embrace it, and that's what you first have to do. You have to embrace it. You have to embrace it as a group. This is not going to work if you got the four guys that we talked about. If you've got Geloff, you got Butler, you got Langoliers, and if you only got those three guys or Ruiz, those are the only guys that are playing for you, then it's going to be tough. I think it's important that you've got a guy like Seth Brown in that lineup because the numbers don't speak for his importance in that lineup, in my opinion, and what he does for that team. I love Seth Brown. I'm a big fan of his. And then, Rooker, he's had a good year. It's not a 270 year. It's a 249, 250 year, but he's got damage. He's hit home runs. He's driven in RBIs. He's an all-star. So it's important for those guys to understand the moment that they're in and embrace it. And if they can do that, they're going to play well against these guys. They understand that they're going nowhere, but they also understand that they're playing for something. They're playing for their future. They're playing to be spoilers. They're playing, in my opinion, to advertise what this team is going to be. Now, your starting pitchers, they're going to have to do their part. They've got to do their part. They've got to pitch the best games. It's crazy. I was having a conversation with a young pitcher actually in the Tampa organization. And I told him that, you're in the rotation at this time of year, and that means something because that team is playing for a playoff spot. And if you're in the rotation, that means that they're confident that you can get the job done. And so it's important that you use these opportunities to practice what you're going to be and what you're going to do when you're in the playoffs, because the guy you're facing in the playoffs is equal to you. He's better than you. You never know. But in those moments, you have to minimize mistakes. You have to pitch championship ball. Defense plays defense. You minimize mistakes. You don't walk people. You force them to do what you want them to do. Well, the A's aren't playing for a playoff spot, but you are playing spoiler. And when you play spoiler, you play championship baseball against these teams. Every inning, every pitch, every at-bat are championship at-bats, pitches, innings.
Yeah, because you're looking over at these teams, right? You just had Toronto in town, or we talked about Seattle, or earlier this year when they're in San Francisco or in LA, even Colorado, they're playing in front of like 40,000 people. I mean, there's a learning experience, when you say, for these young players to look over, and now you're going to see some of the best players in the game.
Yep. I mean, and you're seeing some of the best players in the game, and there's lessons to be learned. And I hope that these guys, we had, I think in our 80s teams and going into the 90s, we had some of the best teams in baseball. But our guys were on the bench watching the other team take batting practice because we want to see if we can get an edge and how we can get an edge and what are they doing, watching their batting practices and watching how they run the bases and watching what they do in the outfield and just what their habits were, because there are things to be learned in watching those things happen. Now, this is a young team, and there's a lot to be learned if you can get out early and see what these Texas Rangers are doing.
It's doing so many different shows with you and talking so much baseball with you off camera and off the air, away from the mics. The right situation, coaching, players, if it's done right, it's life-changing, because your time with the Dodgers was a long time ago.
Yep.
But yet you still reference it all the time because it meant something to you in your life. It's like, I think about what like the Dodgers used to do. They called it the Oriole way. There's something about when an organization is doing something right, it will stick with somebody for the rest of their lives. That's kind of what I want to see the A's start building, because you bring it up all the time. You bring Dodger stuff up. I mean, it means so much to you in your life, what you learned.
Well, when you put your stamp on a player, when you teach a player fundamentally how to play the game, when you teach a player mentally how to play the game, and then the physical parts aren't the important pieces in all of this. The Dodgers, we learned how to fundamentally play the game, but when you fundamentally know how to play the game, you mentally think the game, but you don't think it in the moment. You think it before the moment happens. And those are the things that I carried from being a Dodger. I put a lot of uniforms on, but my core was Dodger. And you can never, and I'm not embarrassed to say that, and I'm not ashamed of that, because the player that I became, the pitcher I became, was because of the lessons that I learned in the organization and from the players that wore that uniform. And there were some great players that wore that uniform.
No doubt about it. And hopefully you're going to be doing the same thing in Nashville. Talk to us about our Nashville Stars. How are our Nashville Stars doing?
Man, we're still moving. We're moving. We're doing positive things at this point. My focus has been on putting together our what I call our key investors, our lead investors, and that process is going along well. I'm going to sit down with our commissioner mid-month this month and have some discussions with him and Dan Halem in New York, and compare notes and see what he's thinking. If there's anything additional that I need to be doing that I'm not doing, I'm going to just give him an update on our progress and where we are at this point. Nashville, I'm going in there on the 15th, and on the 18th, going to meet with some developers and start talking about the ballpark layout, and the areas around the ballpark and what we're going to do in those areas. And then, the rest of it is just really hurry up and wait. The winter meetings are coming. So, doing some planning on the winter meetings when Major League Baseball is there. Hopefully, we can get the commissioner into our offices and spend some time talking with him even more intimately about our plans. We know that he's already put together a expansion committee that's going to start looking at expansion cities at the end of the year. And a lot has been said about Nashville, and most believe that Nashville is definitely the number one spot for expansion. We believe that too, but until they say it, we won't know it. And when they say it, the next step is to be prepared to move into place as the group that represents Nashville.
Is it tough to have patience?
It is. I want to play baseball right now in Nashville. Yeah. I mean, we've been preparing in Nashville over the last 4 or 5 years for baseball in Nashville. And shoot, Tony, man, I watch baseball every day, whether I'm here or not. I watch baseball every day, and I watch the ins and outs of baseball. We were just talking about the pitcher in Washington. We were just talking about him, Strasburg. And his retirement and what you would do in those situations. And I look at contracts. I mean, we've talked about Ohtani and what does that mean? What kind of contract will he garner going forward? And now he's hurt, and we know he's going to need another Tommy John surgery. So how do you look at that? And so I practice every day when I'm in that role, having to make those decisions, or having to make those decisions with my director of baseball operations or my general manager, what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And so, I'm always in a rush to get to that day.
600 million, 500 million, 300, lots change. A hurt Ohtani, that's a big difference in maybe a couple $100 million.
Well, you now, I mean, I've fortunately or unfortunately, I've coached players that have had 2 Tommy Johns. I have been a general manager of a player that's had 2 Tommy Johns, and I can tell you this with Hudson. He's with the Dodgers, and I'm failing his first name, Daniel Hudson. Yes, with Daniel Hudson, we had Huddy in Arizona, and he had a second Tommy John. Neil Elatros was the surgeon. We brought Neil in. We got together with our medical team, and we had to best figure how we could keep him on the mound pitching for a season, keeping him healthy. And we felt that you can't load him up. Bulk pitches are difficult to do. You go out and you throw 5 or 6 innings, and you get to 85, 100 pitches. We felt that over 30 games, that might be more damaging than having Daniel come in as a reliever where we can monitor the amount of pitches he throws, when he throws. We felt that was the best path. Now, Huddy, he fought us and wanted to continue to be a starter, but I think he'll look back on what we did to help him continue his career as something that was a successful move for him, because he left us, signed a huge deal with another team, and since then has signed another huge deal with the Dodgers. And so Ohtani as a starter, obviously you would want to see him do that. But the question that I ask you is, if he has that second Tommy John, which we think is inevitable, how does he stay a two-way player?
It's funny you asked that, because we've addressed that here on Ace Cast
Mm-hmm.
Live, and we've said it for years. And even before he had his second Tommy John, we have said, I want him as a reliever. I want him as a high leverage reliever. And then we saw him do it in the World Baseball Classic. And everybody tries to have these scenarios. Well, what happened? Is he hitting that? I can have him DH. I can have him go warm up. Once we get used to, as you know, I've done the relieving and starting. I got to a point where I'm 8 pitches, 10 pitches, I'm ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't take you that. To me, keeping him healthy, a two-way player long term, that's where I think Ohtani goes.
So you think he's a setup guy, or you think he's a closer?
However you want to call him. You want to make him a closer, high leverage guy. I'm bringing him in somewhere 9th, 7th, 8th in big time situations.
So you think that the impact of, well, it worked for Daniel Hudson. We pitched him in 55 games the year after his second TJ, and he was very, very
going every 5 days is over.
Yeah. And well, we felt that throwing every 5 days would end his career. And so we kept Huddy in a role that we could keep him in. Hopefully, and I don't know who's doing his surgery. I hope it's Neil Elatros. He's one of the best in the business.
Yeah.
I mean, if Neil is doing it, I think that he would probably vote for him to pitch out of the bullpen, where you can control his outing, control his ups.
Yes.
And pitch him that way.
Let's end on this. And I saw this on Twitter last night. I believe it's the 5 Black Aces for the Negro League Museum is putting you into another Hall of Fame.
I'm already in.
You're already in?
Yeah, the guys that are being inducted are not in. And what we were hoping to do, and I shouldn't say we, but I guess I'm a part of that, but Bob Kendrick is such a close friend, and we do have conversation, it was Bob Kendrick's hope that this time we could put the remainder of the living Black Aces in. And so the aces that won't be there this time are CC Sabathia and David Price. And the rest are there: Al Downing, Mike Norris, Dontrell Willis. I said Al Downing.
Yeah.
Dontrell Willis. And God, I'm drawing a blank.
I saw Dwight Gooden was on there.
Doc Gooding, yeah. Doc is going to be there. And there's one more that's supposed to go in, but it's not me. I'm already in.
You're already in.
Yeah.
People forget, like when we have some kids and they're like, well, I really don't know. I'm like, Dwight Gooden was the man.
If anybody was watching baseball in his time,
Oh,
man, you saw a
the
beast.
velocity and that curveball. I mean, it was kind of like in that time in the 80s. I mean, Nolan had been doing it for years, and then he came up, and they even squared off in the playoffs. But you wanted velocity in the big 12-6 curveball. Dwight Gooden was a star in New York, right?
You saw a beast. Mike Norris. Did I say Mike Norris?
Yeah, Mike Norris, yeah.
Yeah, you would have seen a beast if you had an opportunity to see the Doc pitch. The Doc was the dude. And I mean, unbelievable, man. Absolutely unbelievable. Dominant in that time. The Mets would not have had the opportunities that they did in that time to show up, maybe make the playoffs if it hadn't been for Doc.
They had a good staff. By the way, Vita's picture's on there too, but he's already in, right?
No, Vita is not in.
How's Vida Blue not in?
He's not in. Vita was not in. Yeah, Vita, and that's actually why I'm going, because I'm going to accept his award for Vita. Yeah, that's one.
Got the pen. I got the pen going today.
I see you.
The great Vita Blue. He was, at Vita. The one thing we'll let you go, but I actually started when I first got in my career at KMBR. Vita was doing stuff with the Giants, and literally I knew Vita for like 30 years.
Yeah.
And Vita was the nicest guy. And then over the years, you really get to know him. And I did some TV with him here. I did radio with him. I mean, Vita was really the most just that whole thing about being a kid and from the country. And that never left him. He was just the nicest guy to everybody. And then for a lot of the young people he was around, they didn't realize his greatness. Of course, I knew his greatness. When you win MVP, Cy Young, and 3 World Series, I mean, Vita Blue, with the lack of numbers being put up today by starters, you could say he warrants a plaque in Cooperstown for what he did in his career. But I'm so glad they're honoring Vita Blue. Sad he won't be here for it, but truly one of the greats.
No doubt about it. You won't meet a more genuine person with his plateau, I guess is the best way to put it. He did a lot for the game of baseball. The numbers that he put up, the strikeouts, the wins, the performances. It would be, you would think he'd walk in the room with the biggest head in the room.
Oh, he could easily big league everybody.
For all that he did, you would think that he would be that guy, but far from it. I think if you make a person, you say, this is the person that I'm molding, this is the person that I'm making, Vita would be the person you would want to make, because he was kind to everyone, had nothing but kindness to say to anyone and everyone. He made you feel comfortable. Matter of fact, he made you feel like he knew you, for a long time. And he was just a tremendous human being.
First time I went to the Negro League Museum, I was with the Raiders. We're in Kansas City. I'm like, I got to go. And it's right next to the Jazz Museum. It's like $15. You get both of them. It's amazing. And you walk through the very beginning. It's like a timeline. And then all of a sudden I heard these 2 voices narrating the story. And I'm like, I know these voices. And I realized that's Vita Blue and Marty Lurie. And I remember texting them both going, I'm in the Negro League Museum right now and watching this thing, and your voice is on here. It's like, yeah, I mean, Vita, for what he means to the history of baseball. All right, we got a little A's Rangers coming up here in a little bit.
Looking forward to it, actually. I really am. This is a better brand of baseball at this time of the year for the A's. And truth is, I'm excited to watch them play baseball at this point. Earlier in the year, you can pick and choose games, but I think with this group of kids that are taking the field on a day-to-day basis, I look forward to watching them play baseball.
The great Dave Stewart later on today, NBC Sports California, doing A's pre and post game live.